worldwide to be more confident, resilient, and brave in their careers and indeed in their lives. So, if something resonates with you as you listen today and you want more information, check out the show notes below for a variety of ways to get in touch with my guest and me. So, a question. Do you ever feel like you're stuck in a job that just doesn't feel right anymore? Or maybe you've been climbing the corporate ladder for years, but now you're unsure if it's worth the struggle and the sacrifice. If you're facing a career change, it can be or become a real identity crisis. But I don't want you to worry about that because you're not alone. Lydia Lee, who is my guest today, knows exactly how you feel and has a truly inspiring story about how she made a significant career transition. She'll share with us her insights on how we can redefine success, navigate uncertainty, and find more meaningful work. As the Work Reinvention Coach, I love that she calls herself that, and she's also a solopreneur strategist. Lydia has helped countless people break free from the constraints of corporate life and create their paths to success. With a focus on purposeful work that aligns with our strengths and values, Lydia is all about building a business that we love and want to just keep for years to come. Whether you're considering a career change or you're just looking for ways to make your current role more fulfilling and satisfying, stay tuned. And get ready to learn how to transition and thrive in your career with Lydia Lee, all the way from her home on the tropical island of Bali. Hello, Lydia.
Hello, hello, and good morning from a beautiful, almost sunny day because it's quite early in the morning, but I see the peaks of the sunshine coming through. So it's a good day in the future. I'm in one day ahead of you.
Yes, you are. And it's good to know that tomorrow is going to be a good day. I love that.
That's
Thank
right.
you. Thank you so much for being here and for getting up so early to do that. So let's just dig in a little bit here. Tell us the abridged version of your backstory so we can understand what you were doing before you reinvented yourself.
Mm. Yes, picking that right. I have a lot to say about my story, but I think picking some of the milestone moments that cause change, or I wish I could say that I had an epiphany that I wanted a better life, a bigger purpose in life, but I was actually going through a little bit of suffering that helped to instigate some change for me. As they always say, we need sometimes some pain to be motivated, right, for looking at better ways to do something. So when I was working in corporate, this is almost about 11 and a half years ago, I was working in the international education industry. It was one of my best jobs to date because I got to travel quite often. I was a business development director. And actually, part of having that job really gave me the travel bug because I went to a lot of countries and countries I would usually not book for a holiday. But being able to explore the world with my job was really lovely. And it was one of the big reasons of why I took that job. And as I was working through in that career, I was sort of ticking all the boxes, right? Doing all the things right, I was one of the lead people in the company that was eligible for being partner in a company. And this is before I was 30 years old. So this was a big achievement in my eyes about being able to own a part of a company, something I could potentially not do on my own, or so I thought. And so really going through the motions of making sure that I was the top producer, right, in that company was a huge, huge goal for me in order to allow myself to have that opportunity. And for many years, I worked a lot more than the 40-hour boundary of time, especially with the travel and then taking work home with me, managing a big department, for example. I was probably averaging about 60 hours or more a week and not taking a holiday. So what I had a bad habit of doing back in the day in order to pay off my student loans and be sort of a responsible human, I always got paid out. So at the time of the year that I left corporate, it had been almost 3 years that I didn't take a holiday, which is a recipe, as you can imagine, for burnout and disaster. So when I was going through the motions of this sort of career trajectory, it didn't occur to me that this was unhealthy, because I think I saw everybody else around me similarly doing the same thing to get ahead. I didn't feel abnormal at all. And it wasn't until I went into I was going to one of my trips for the year. I was in a trade mission with the Embassy of Canada, going to Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia to promote education in Canada. And it was the dead of winter. I had been traveling for almost a few weeks at that time. And when I was in a hotel room about to go to my many appointments for the day, my entire body had a shutdown. And basically, what happened to me, long story short, is that I had temporary agoraphobia in a hotel room in Moscow in 2012, I believe that was the year. And that made me sort of wake up, right, on my physical body. Even though my mental capacity was like, go, 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 keep hustling, my physical body was like, no, we are going to take you down. As they say, the body keeps the score. And that was the beginning part of my journey of taking a pause and having to face some of the things I wasn't facing, right? The unhealthy practices, the things that were causing me to have to do harm to my mental and my physical health, right? And going through that suffering of taking a sabbatical, having to hire a therapist because I thought something was wrong with me, and finding out some clarity around what was causing me to have such a reaction, right, to my life, really opened up the doors to other possibilities, right? What can I control? What did I have to redefine as success in my life? And were these choices I was making to hustle, to get to that holy grail of a partnership, right? All the things that I was running towards, were they really giving me the life experience that I want to have, right? So through that experience, working with therapists and coaches through a 9-month period of time, I quickly realized that a lot of the environments I was in my career, who I was working with, what I was working on, were not in alignment with some of the values that I believed in, and also not in alignment with the balance that I really wanted to have in my life, right? That it shouldn't, I didn't want that narrative, right? Kind of coming from my own immigrant parents that come from Malaysia and immigrated to Canada, that same storyline of that we have to work twice as hard, sweat, blood, and tears to feel successful, to have success. I needed to change that narrative so that doesn't continue to be an unhealthy practice in my life.
What a story. I can't imagine what that must have felt like when your body shut down and you were in Russia. I just can't imagine.
It was the scariest thing I've ever, because no one was around me. I didn't have any family with me. I remember calling my partner at the time, and he just sort of went, Get on a plane, come back home. You need people around you." And
Yeah.
me being this sort of strong, or what I thought, was this strong spirited woman, it's like, no, 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 it'll pass. I'll just need a day off and then I'll get back to it. And I think it was really good. I would never want to wish that sort of panic and anxiety on someone for
Yeah.
3 days in a hotel room, but it was sort of something that was the catalyst for change for me, that I needed to feel that pain, because I couldn't feel the other pains that I was already feeling, not sleeping, working the 70 hours a week. It certainly didn't make a dent
Well,
for me until something major happened, right?
and you're so right. When we get caught up in this, I've been there myself. When you get caught up in it and everyone else is doing the same thing as you are, it feels normal. It feels like, okay,
Correct.
this is what we have to do, right? This
Mhm.
is what it takes. And everybody else is doing it. So it must be right and it must be okay.
Mm. Well, and also it made me feel a bit of shame, right? Around, if
Yeah.
everyone is doing it, my colleagues they have children, they have families. I didn't have children and a family at the time. And so it was sort of like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
not resilient enough, strong
Yeah.
enough to handle this. And then the sort of tornado of thoughts come. It's like, well, then how am I going to handle being a partner in this company? How am I going to handle managing a bigger department? It sort of
Yeah.
snowballs into
The
simply
self-doubt.
not being good
Yep.
enough.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Absolutely. I mentioned something in the introduction, you and I have talked about before, and it's about the how we attach what we do to our identity. and how that changes how we perceive our identity when we are forced into or choosing to make a career or life transition. What what
Mm.
what do you think about that? What happened to you?
It was interesting because when I look at the job title itself, it wasn't something I said, "Oh, I just want to have this job title for the rest of my life." It wasn't
Yeah.
the identity wasn't about the title or the prestige of a particular occupation. It was very much about a story that a sense of guilt that my parents sacrificed quite a bit to get us from Malaysia, to Canada. I had to, you know, really work hard to get myself into a particular status, right, in the workplace in order to feel like I had opportunities that could grow my future. And when I even contemplated, like even entertained the idea of, could there be a different pathway for me that is not this climbing up the corporate ladder? Because I did that and I went up in the top of the mountain, but the view wasn't what I was expecting, you know and there's this interesting thing about that concept of sunk cost bias, right? Of, god, I already gave up so much to get here. I mean, I would be a fool to leave it. I must figure it out. I must keep pushing forward. But there was this other part of my head that sort of went, what if you just don't continue? What if you decide this is just the end of a chapter, not the end of your story, but just the end of one of the chapters of many chapters of your life? Right. And then it didn't feel so permanent, didn't feel so, oh God, this is the only decision I get to make for the rest of my life. Right. But in making that decision, I had to grapple with the identity that I had created through my family and generational history, right? Of what we were supposed to be about. And that there were no entrepreneurs in my family, for example. Everybody always stood in line and, got to where they needed to go in the most responsible way. And veering off those values of being a responsible adult, and sort of honoring the sacrifice that my parents did to get me to where I was the identity I had to grapple with, rather than, oh God, I really want to keep this job title. Now, for my clients, for example, I work with a lot of people in mid-career, that have had a long career. They're a lawyer, a nurse, right? A teacher, a professor. And for them, sometimes it's the story of their career. What am I going to say in a dinner party
Right.
when someone
Right.
asks me the common question we always ask, which I hate this question, is what do you do? There's so much more to us than what we do, right? But
Right.
that is the common question we get asked quite often. So, of course, it's been normalized in society that what you say about what you do in terms of vocation, anyway, right, is the thing that defines everything about you, right? So, if I say I'm a doctor, there's certain elements, right, of a story that goes into someone's head. Oh, it's a prestigious, they must be quite wealthy, they're respected, they must have had a good education, right? There's all these attachments of values that we don't want to lose, if we don't get to say that title anymore, right? But I
Right.
think just as my story had to, it's not a moment, it's not a overnight thing, I think, that happens, because our stories grow and stick with us in a lifetime. So it takes a much longer time to understand, who am I within my family dynamic? Who am I within my own primary family dynamic if I have a spouse and children? Who am I in my community dynamic, where people might respect me or look up to me for certain things that I say of what I do? And how else can I keep that identity of myself that is less fleeting? That no matter if I change jobs or change families or change location, those value systems of identity continues to come with me. So it's not so volatile. When we depend on things like a job title or a trajectory of a career, those things are changeable, as we all have seen happen. We no longer sort of stick to a career for 50 years. And sometimes things like a pandemic can totally
Yeah.
set the tone differently. All right. So learning that we can't just lean on that career story to be our identity, but create other stories that we take with us. No matter what we do, they're infused into that role every single time.
Yeah, and the you're so right about that. And the who am I question needs to be answered again, but it's who am I now that things are changing, that I'm
Correct.
changing, that I want something different. Who am I if I'm not what I used to
Yeah.
be, what I used to do? And
So true.
how do I grapple with that and figure out the answer to that question?
Mm.
Because
Yes.
until we do answer that question, it's really difficult to move forward.
Mm.
Don't you think?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think I didn't know who I was because I was so busy. 70 hours a week is a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
To focus on something beyond yourself. So I didn't hear my own voice. I couldn't feel my instincts.
Well, there was
We
no
all have
time.
those.
There was no
Correct.
time. There was not enough energy left, right? For you to
Exactly.
focus. And we get in that rut and we get into that cycle, right? And it becomes we're literally going through the motions
Hmm.
and not spending enough time just asking, some pretty important questions about, like what am I doing? Why
Hmm.
am I doing this? What am I
Absolutely.
getting out of is it worth it? Is this worth the sacrifice, right? The struggle,
And
the
everything
pain.
has a well, I like to use the word exchange, right? Because sacrifice sometimes means, I think to me anyway, sacrifice is like, oh, I'm giving up something I really want for something I don't want, right? Whereas an exchange is everything has a cost, if you will. It could be a good cost,
Right,
could be a negative cost, right? Like me,
right.
me taking that leap of faith, to start my first agency, right, out of my corporate job, which was not through the cubicle. That I would name a transitional career that I got all the networks and I had, all the experience from the education industry, solved one tiny problem. And my employers became my first clients. That's what I negotiated as part of, you don't lose me completely, but we will have a different dynamic of a work relationship. And,
Right.
they took the bite and they became my first client as a consultant, a consultancy agency. But when I think about those choices I made, there was an exchange. There's an exchange in feeling stability and security that I used to have, right, to have that sort of consistent salary.
Yeah.
But then when I questioned that stability, part of me had to get into the details, right? When I thought about, okay, I'm not allowed to quit unless my agency was making exactly the same amount of money that I made in corporate. But I made that sort of grand statement without really looking at the math. And
Yeah.
one of the biggest wake up calls for me was when I actually did the math, because I was someone that avoided looking at numbers and my bank account and things like that back in the day. That sort of mindset around, I don't want to know what I spent to numb myself for last month, But when I did the math of like, the salary I was making, which is a 6-figure job, it was 40% tax, a tax bracket that I had to give up to the government. I divided that take home pay by the number of hours I was actually working in reality.
Oh
And lo and
boy.
behold, I was making less than my assistant,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
was a huge wake up call to go, okay, when I say yes to things like a partnership dangling, parent for many months actually
Yeah.
dangling in front of my face about, God, is this the last opportunity I get to do something big? With someone's investment, right? Without me having to take out a loan for things, right? And so, but I
Yeah.
had to analyze it, as you say, like it's not just a good option just because it's a carrot stick and that because someone told you that's the thing you're supposed to go for, but is making that choice, right? Giving me the experience I really wanted to have as a career person in my lifestyle balance? Does it give me more of what I want to experience as a human? And if the answer is no, right, which I knew from things not changing in just my position, where I had a conversation with my bosses about what wasn't working, that these hours were crazy, and that I couldn't even people couldn't have a family if they were to do these hours, right? It was
Right.
sort of like, well, it's just how it's been done. It's been done for
Yeah.
many years like this. We're an
Yeah.
old dinosaur industry. Everybody in education does this. They would used to call me the road warrior. It's like a medal of a badge of honor to be a
Badge of
road
honor. Yeah.
warrior,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it wasn't. It was like a lonely badge of honor to be on the road,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
without any. efforts and community. And so
Mhm.
knowing that, I had to question, even though the financial piece made sense, it sort of made sense for me to go into that role from what I've been working towards. But what didn't make sense was that none of my reality of the balance I needed in my life to be able to see my friends and family, right? To be able to enjoy my work and enjoy my life. That was never going to change if I took that partnership. If anything, it probably would get worse.
Right. Right.
All I had to do was look ahead of my colleagues that were older than me that had that position and see if that was
And,
the life I wanted to
and
lead,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And ask yourself, is that what I want? Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So let's talk about there are these legacy definitions of success, right?
Hmm.
How do we create a healthier, more liberating metric for ourselves so that we can feel that we've achieved success on our own terms?
Mm. It's still an algorithm and mathematical formula I'm still consistently working out because I think
Yeah.
as we, I don't know, get into different chapters of our life every single year, we get a bit more insight, about what it is that we need in our lives. And I
So
think,
what are the considerations?
yeah, when I think about what's the common metric we all use is always money, right? Is how
Yeah.
much are we earning? And that becomes the number. We say yes to certain jobs for that number. We say yes to certain things, right, for that increase of number, right, that we think encompasses the definition of success. But I think, as I've gone through many different transitions in my life and my client's life, there's a lot of other metrics that are beyond the amount of money that you're making. We do need money because we live in a monetary society. So money represents security, represents options and opportunities for us to grow our lives and do better in our communities as well. And that is for sure still a metric to use for one of the pieces of the pie. But in terms of internal happiness and sort of how I want to live my life every day. So I think about things like time. Time is a currency for me, right? So if time's a currency for me, how much of that time do I need on a weekly, monthly, yearly level? And what would I use that time for? So even when we think about time off, we always go, we just need more time, but we don't actually know what we're going to do with that time or what we would do with that amount of money even, right? So having those details of what will I do with that amount of money, right? Or amount of time, I think it's really important to define what is actually enough. Because that's one of the other problems I think that we face is what is enough?
Mm,
Because when you make a certain goal, I certainly felt that way in my business, for example, right? Okay, the first goal is just to replace my income, right? Then the second goal is to make the next first six figures and beyond. And every year the goal changes because you want to do bigger things, more things. But when I think about, well, what's the point? Why is more better? Why can't enough be just great and ideal?
oh, I love that question. I love that
Right?
question.
It's
Why
like, 'cause
is more better? I love
more
that.
is not better. Maybe less is better. And less could be about boundaries. Less could be about not taking on more responsibilities, more offerings, more things. I know you and I are in the online business world. How much time how much, sort of opportunities there that people go, you have to have more of this, you have to have more books, more courses, more
Yeah.
bigger audience, more shows, more platforms, right? Like it never ends and it becomes a sort of virus, I think, that it happened in my own business as well, that I was just doing more for the sake of more, for the sake of
Right.
comparison to
Well,
my
but
peers.
yeah, so even in this world, outside of the core, you and I have both been in the corporate world.
Mhm.
Even in this world, there
Mm.
is that sense of competing.
Yes.
I need to do more because everybody else is doing more.
Yes. Oh, you
I'm
feel like
not
you're
doing
left
what they're
behind.
doing. I need to do what they're doing.
Mm.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Even in the business world, like I remember saying to my therapist when I reached my second burnout in 2015 around my business, which is ironically the highest revenue year of my entire business, and then I melted down.
Wow.
Because I again overworked. And I remember saying to her, man, you can take a girl out of corporate, but you can't take the corporate out of a girl sometimes. And so that was a mindset part
Yeah.
around, to me, screw the cubicle, even the concept of screw the cubicle is not about just leaving a job. It's a particular paradigm of a mindset of believing certain things to be happy, believing certain things to feel content. Even the word content, I mean, do we feel that these days with so many options, so many decisions we have to make,
Yeah.
right? And so that was a huge part of my second burnout, gave me the next insight of understanding what is enough for me, that I can stay content here. And if I get there, I can just lay here for a bit,
Yeah.
simmer
Yeah.
for a bit, sort of be happy here, and feel good about staying here without needing to think about what's out there in the horizon, what's greener on the other side, and enjoy the
Well,
pleasures,
and
right, of what I've
is it
created.
based on other people's expectations, or is it something you really want?
Exactly.
I think we
Exactly.
have to ask, again, tough questions we have to ask ourselves.
And some of us, I mean, for us, I think there is no clear answer until I like to say to my clients, just try that on for size. It's like a
Yeah.
coat. Sometimes
Yep.
you're like, oh, I think I like that fashion. Not quite sure it's going to look good on me or if I feel good on it, but I'm just going to
Try
wear
it
it for the
on.
weekend,
Right.
see what happens, how I feel in it,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's, even values aren't permanent, right? What I thought I
That's
valued
right.
10 years ago, certainly not what I value today, but I
Right.
had to try it on for size in order to go, did that fit? And give a certain amount of time to go through that, and then have a honest conversation with, am I just wanting to put that coat on because it looks good externally and I think people like me better for that coat, or do I actually feel good within myself when I wear that coat, or that value, where I behave that way, where I believe in those things and act according to those beliefs, right? That's the real value of behavior.
Yeah.
How do I feel? Do I feel better about myself, the people around me, about the world, right? If I'm onto something, your body will tell you. Your little instincts will, I get a little flutter from my stomach to my sort of neck when something's right. And
Yeah.
that's how I've learned to listen to my body, because sometimes the brain can be quite busy, but the body, I find, not in control too much. It sort of does its own thing unconsciously at times, and I can feel that feeling. I may not be able
Yeah.
to think out that feeling, but I could feel it in my bones, feel it in my skin. Something's a little right. It's like falling in
Yeah.
love. You just don't know
Yeah.
why, it just happens, right?
Yeah.
And then I follow my nose. Okay, that felt right. Let me just keep following my nose down that rabbit hole of possibility of this thing I might consider, be curious about, not have any permanent decisions about anything, but just let me experiment, test it out a little bit and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. So, that testing out uh, raises a lot of uncertainty, and it requires us to take a certain level of risk.
Hmm.
So, you and I have talked about the fact that we are both recovering perfectionists and high achievers.
Yep.
How did you deal with the uncertainty and that risk taking part of it?
Mm. It it is so interesting, when I think about risk, because what I used to do as a perfectionist, as a type A personality woman, it was sort of either all or nothing, or nothing at
Mm.
all.
Yeah. Oh,
It's like
yeah.
there's no in the middle for me back in the day. And still, to be honest, I have to be very conscious and mindful about it, because that personality type and that part of myself still exists. And sometimes it does really well. I throw the kitchen sink at something and it works really well. And I go, woohoo! So look at that. But then a lot of times too, it was sort of unnecessary. I could have gone at a more sustainable pace, a less, calculated risk pace, rather than sort of put everything
Yeah.
on the line. Um, you know, as an example of sort of what's worked for me in terms of risk taking, which I think is something I still practice today, was, for example, my exploration of exploring whether or not living in different countries, you know, being a digital nomad for my business, being location independent, right, was right for me. And I started this journey back in 2013, when the hashtag remote work, or, digital nomad wasn't a thing yet. So I literally didn't know anyone doing it. And everybody else I like could read about that was doing location independent careers were like coders, programmers, techie people, mostly men. And I was a service-based gal. I didn't really know anyone doing it that way. Would clients fire me for not being able to be in person or have an office space or a receptionist that would greet them, right? So it was all these things I had to explore and understand before I could make these big decisions. And a huge part of me was so afraid to get out of Vancouver, which is where I, lived. And I knew everything was familiar to me. I wanted to see a new world, but going alone at it, felt really scary for me. But I also knew another fear that was bigger, it trumped this fear, was the fear of regret, right? Regretting me
Yeah.
not trying,
Mm.
regretting that I said no to something simply because I had, a gap of clarity, right? I wouldn't be able to say I knew for sure this wouldn't work for me. It was just in my head. And so how could I give myself the spaciousness to explore without risking everything, right? And in order to convince myself to take a leap of faith, I had to say to myself, we're only going for a small boundary of time. You can check out at any time. You can come home if you like. You can get that apartment you were living in the entire time, and nothing has to change if you decide to come home. But not to say to myself that if I took the plane out to Southeast Asia, it was my one decision I ever got to make, and that was it. That scared the crap out of me, right? But if I said, hey, let's just go for 3 months. And if 3 months worked out well, let's go for another 3 months and see what happens. And then I can decide by the end of the year if I want to be in Vancouver, if it's a split time, halfway here, halfway there, right? Let's do it step by step, quarter by quarter, month by month, and continue to check in with ourselves if that's in alignment, right? Because then my little ego mind or the little afraid part of my brain wasn't like, what are you doing? You could, if you give up everything and then you'll never get back to Canada again, they won't want you here, da da da. It goes to these stories because it's so permanent.
Right.
But
And
if I
then you
gave it just a
retreat,
month
right?
and
Then
then
you
I
do
retreat,
nothing. Yeah.
too
Yeah.
big of a
Yeah.
jump, too big of
I,
a jump for
that's
me.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Most of us don't want to jump off a cliff and hope the parachute opens. We want to go through milestone by milestone, tiny little tiers at a time, which is
Yeah.
actually, in my opinion, the better way to go because it gives you feedback, without you scaring the crap out of yourself and then retreating forever and then not wanting to do it ever again.
Yeah.
Right?
I love the way you did that. I love that you told yourself, this is not the last decision I'll ever make. There are plenty of smaller decisions along the way. And I
Mm.
don't have to buy into this being a permanent move, right? I'll do it for 3 months. I'm just gonna go on a sabbatical for 3 months.
Yes.
We have to talk to ourselves. We have to create a mindset that makes us feel more comfortable.
Mm. And I think when big goals get too big, all right, it's just kind of
Yeah.
hard to digest.
Yeah. They have to be
Right? It's
broken
too
down.
big of a bite.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's why I think that people with a perfectionist like myself and you as well, it can feel so anxious, right? To
Yeah.
have to achieve those big goals. And where you're at now from where you want to go seems too far away. And then
Right.
that doubt creeps in. You're no longer, you have to wait too long to get a
And
win.
and the question of how, right? How am I gonna get there?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if the goal is smaller, right? So we do it month by month. I remember the first thing I thought when I landed in Cambodia, for example, which wasn't the place I wanted to be in forever. It was lovely to visit as a tourist, horrible to work from. The internet was absolutely atrocious. So then I set out a little post on Facebook and said, anyone know a co-working space? Is that a thing? That I can do my next course in and da 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 da. And someone had recommended Ubud, Bali, which I never even heard of before I came here. So I remember thinking, I'm going to spend 30 days there because that was the amount of time that I could get my visa for anyway. So perfect. And what do I really need in 30 days instead of what I need in a year? Right. That helped me to be clearer on what is necessary right now
That is
for me
such
to
a
feel
good tip.
good.
That is
Right?
such a good
Even
tip.
even when I think about my business stages, like I used to think about, oh, all the future. I need that website. I need the funnels. I need the no. What do you need right now to even just get started on this one tiny step of the project?
Yeah.
Right? Then I can
Yeah.
laser focus to what's essential rather than put my plate, into overdrive by thinking too long into the future, which actually doesn't
And
help anyway.
and trying to do too many things at once, too fast, and none of them get done well. And
Mm.
almost always the most important thing didn't get done first.
Exactly.
right?
It's like a bunch of mini things getting done, but at 20%,
Yeah,
right? Which meant that
exactly.
nothing got done at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So share with us some of the pros and cons that you have experienced in running your business remotely in a beautiful place like Bali. And that is a location independent business. You could run it from anywhere.
Mm. I definitely had a lot more cons when I first started because the infrastructure, for
Yeah.
remote work was not. I remember if we were having this call, I would have had to drive to a co-working space at 5 in the morning, things like that, to hopefully reserve a room and have some decent internet, maybe above 5 megabytes. It's a lot has changed since then. We're on fiber optics and things like that. So, but when thinking about the pros and cons of remote work and also a remote business, that sometimes, the pros are obviously being able to work from anywhere, be able to experience different cultures, food, time zones, weather, temperature, right? People, right? Community was really important to me, to learn from different people as well. Those are all amazing parts of travel, right? And if you were just traveling on a sabbatical or on a little holiday, travel's great. There's no cons, in my opinion, of travel. But when you have to work while you're traveling, right? And that really takes discipline. And that's sometimes part of the difficulty I find that people might have. And I certainly had that until I understood what were the boundaries and rituals I had to have in order to keep enjoying a new place as a guest and a tourist, but also be, hunkered down when I need to be, to focus on my business, to grow my business, and being able to know what days are business days, what days are beach days. Because I used to want to do both, so I would bring my laptop to the beach. And guess how much work I got done?
Yeah.
Not much, because the sun's shining, the water's tempting. And maybe I could do a couple emails when I'm at the beach. I certainly can't do deep work. Right. So with deep work, I needed an office. I needed somewhere quiet. I needed, a way of showing up for work that felt like work, so that my brain was really
Right.
paying attention there. So disciplining when is pleasure time, when is exploring time, and not saying yes to everything, because everyone you meet, by the way, when you work and travel, is everyone on a holiday. So they're inviting you to all the things, all the events, all the outings, and it's very tempting to say yes to all of it because there's a bit of FOMO going on of, oh God, I've got to do it all. Right. But I think your attention and your focus will be so much more present and mindful when you just get that thing you need to get done for work, and then spend the afternoon or the next day focusing on the pleasure items, the hobbies, the right passion things that you want to do for personal life.
Right. Right.
Um, the other struggle that I think people can experience is loneliness. Because when you're traveling a lot, and I certainly used to do this, I was in a new country every 2 months, month and a half, things like that, which was lovely in the beginning of time, but it got old pretty quickly for me, because one of the things that I value the most, that makes me feel stable, safe, secure, is having good people and communities around me that I can rely on. Right. The same people, I don't have to tell my story to 100 times. Right. They know me, they see me, they hear me. And when you travel that often, it can be hard to build community because things can be transient. Right. People you
Yeah.
meet, you share your life with them for a 5-day period of time, and then they leave and they have to start over again. Telling a story again within the next person, right? So
Yeah.
that can feel sometimes disorienting, not feeling like you've got people that you can commit to, right? And so therefore, a big thing that works for me now is actually more long-term travel. So when I travel to Europe or Mexico, wherever I might go to every year, I will stay a minimum of 3 months, and I will, right, make sure to find the right people and curate the right people that fit. I don't handful of friends rely on that have shared interests, like-minded, mindset, and that we can do things together while I'm there. And I really learn something about myself in my experience there. And 3 months to 4 months at times, that gives me a lot more. You're less of a tourist, you really are more of an expat. And it allows you to, yeah, really just go slow, enjoy the place slowly, rather than trying to see it all in one gulp. Right. And that makes a huge change as well for me.
Yeah. The way you were describing the discipline that you need to when you're there to work as well as to enjoy, it's
Mm,
not dissimilar to what happened to so many people
So true.
during the pandemic, and they were forced to work from home. And the discipline it requires to do that well
Mm,
is it's the same thing as what you just described. Whether you work, I mean, I've been working from home, even in my corporate life. I worked from home because I ran an international team. So it didn't matter where I sat because nobody else was sitting around me, right?
right.
So it was the discipline that I had to learn, that the laundry got done not on the days I was working, right?
That's right. Yeah,
And
because
and
I
dinner.
would multitask as well, right? Oh, I'll just do
Oh
a bit of
yeah.
dishes
Oh
while
yeah.
I'm listening to a podcast.
Yeah. 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 All right. So I want to ask you one last question before we get to the tips, Lydia.
Mhm.
You have designed a business for yourself that aligns now with your values, which you've already told us have changed over time, and your lifestyle choices. How do we do that? What are some of the steps that we take to make sure that we design a business that we want to start or continue in so that it
Mm,
aligns with our values and our lifestyle choices?
great question. I think that when it comes to work, like work is a big part of our lives. So we do have to have a great relationship with work in order for our personal life to also feel good, right? In balance as well. So work is sort of where I start. I think most of us will have to work and we want to work. I think it gives us a sense of contribution and meaning and purpose to it. So in order to find work that doesn't feel like clocking in, clocking out, right? Is really understanding what is that next chapter or that next body of work that I want to create based on what I've accumulated in my experience, my story, all the pains and gains, that I've had to go through in my life. What now is my most meaningful contribution in how I can define work? And sometimes that's not, people want to always go with a title again because we love titles. What do I call myself for my next chapter of work? And I think that you can name yourself anything you want. I mean, you can see on the screen there, my title is the Freedom Instigator. What the hell does that mean? Right? You can call yourself anything you want, but what is the most important part is understanding how do you want to give value? How do you want to support people? What's that transformation you're proud to be a part of? Right? What causes in the world or in the sphere that you live in that you go, man, that thing really bothers me. I wish I could help people to do that. And with my skill sets, how would I approach solving that problem in an interesting way or in a unique way, right? Of supporting people. And so taking the time, I think, to evaluate our resumes, evaluate our body of work, right? And understand beyond the job titles, what are the common other themes or patterns that keep occurring in my work? Whether I'm a doctor, I'm this or that, doesn't matter if my title changes. How do I keep showing up in a way that really resonates with people or resonates with myself, where I feel like, wow, when I spent time doing that, it just felt like time just came and gone. And I didn't calculate, I didn't count the minutes to the clock. It was just sort of in flow. I felt a bit of ease, a bit of flow in when I was doing that task, right? And start recognizing those patterns so that when we think about kind of building, I kind of look at like a big pot of soup, that we're putting the ingredients of what is meaningful work? What is the thing I'm passionate about? How do I want to help? Those are all little ingredients that you're just setting aside, putting it in the pot before you brew it, to understand what's your next career. So that can be in alignment with the best work you should be doing and also how you would actually be practicing that work matters as well. So instead of just saying, I want to be in the medical field or I want to be a writer, well, what it is about writing and how it is that you want to write for others or write for yourself that's meaningful to you, right? That gives it some context, some meat to how you might describe some of your genius zone, right? Elements, which is so part of alignment with ensuring that your work is in your strengths and your work is in your interests. Interests matter, doesn't it? It makes us kind of
Right.
want to keep going because deep interest, coaching is just a skill for me, for example. I can coach in multiple topics, but if you made me coach in a particular topic I have no interest in, it's going to feel like work.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
If I'm
exactly.
coaching on things I'm already reading about, I'm doing in my own personal life without thinking twice about it, then it becomes a great blend of that sweet spot. I call it the sweet spot of meaningful
Yeah.
work, right? Where it blends skills and it blends the deep interest and it blends the impact or the cause that you want to be one of the pebbles in the ripple effect in the ocean
Yeah.
of that cause, right?
And the skills are both hard skills and soft skills, right?
Correct.
And it's the blend of those. And it's getting to understand what lights you up,
Totally.
right? What just makes the day fly by because you
Mm,
get to go do that. It's understanding and kind of digging deep and figuring out what are those things for me, right? It's a
exactly.
yeah, it's a
It's
very
kind of like I call it like, if you were to build a job for yourself, like you get to decide what are the objectives, what are the day-to-days. That's even imagining. Sometimes some of us are very visual. Imagine a whole day. What's a great day that combines the idea of work for you and also gives you the balance of something else that you want to do with your time?
yeah,
Is it spending time with your kids? Is it going to yoga class in the middle of the day? Is it being able to work? I'm a bit of a sprinter, so I can't drag myself for 8 hours. I used to do that and felt really miserable, but I'm happiest when I can focus on one or two things to move my business forward in 2 hours, 3 hours, and then take off for the rest of the day instead of forcing myself to keep working on all sorts of things all the
right,
time.
right.
Right. So I'm a sprinter. I can do deep work. I'm a deep diver. And then I need a break. Right. What kind of
Yeah,
work style do you have? Some of my clients they need to do a little bit and then they need variety because they're sometimes neurodiverse and need different contexts, different things to keep interest going. Right.
right.
Everyone has a style of working. And I think it's important to also identify because that will help you to build the right day, the right type of way of offering your services or products that is going to be right in alignment with the way you want to work and how you want to construct your day and design your life as well.
Because the truth is you get to create that.
Yeah.
And
That's the freedom.
that's the freedom. That's the beauty of it. That's how that's how you land on something that really is fulfilling and gives you the the sense of it's what I call soul fulfilling, right?
Mm,
It's a soulful fit. That's
love
what it
that.
ends up being when you do that. When you look at your values and your lifestyle and what you want and what you're good at and what you love to do and put
Mm.
all of those things together and just stick them in one of those what do they call I have this vision of the lottery number thing. Just
Yeah,
put it all in there and jumble it up and then see what comes out. And if you don't like the way it came out, put it back in, jumble it up again, see what comes out again. And
exactly.
because what you put in is everything that you want, right?
Exactly. They're just little
How it
ingredients,
comes
right? That
out
you can
when you
change like a recipe.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Lydia. Unfortunately, we have to do a wrap here, but before we do, I would love for you to just uh, wrap it up, put a bow on this, and tell us what are the biggest takeaways that we can leave with here today.
Yes, I think we could have a part 2 of this conversation as well, 'cause there's like well, as we get deeper,
Yeah,
I wanna say more. Maybe
yeah,
we do have one in the future.
maybe we do.
Yeah, I think based on, a lot of what we talked about, one of the things we leaned on or gleaned over is about experimentation and exploration. And I think in order for us to take certain leaps of faith and to decide on some of the big choices we're making in our lives, should I leave my job or start a business? Should I stay where I'm, currently at? Those are big questions to answer that aren't going to be an overnight solution or an answer that just, comes to you when you wake up in the morning. And I think we have to take tiny steps to in a way align ourselves back to what we know and what we can feel about our lives that are important without distraction and noise because it's really hard to as I said before, listen to that inner voice, feel the instincts from your body, right? Hear that little, that vision that's inside of you at all times, that when it's being bombarded by to-dos, and the automated way of how we live our lives, there's no spaciousness, no reason for us to think differently, right? So I would recommend, one of the, tips I give my clients is just an hour a week. Doesn't have to take very long, right? Just an hour a week, go for a walk, right? Or maybe put yourself into your favorite coffee shop with a piece of cake and some tea, right? Wherever is this place that's outside of your day-to-day, especially if you work from home, get out of the ordinary circumstance and environment, see something new, and just start to ask yourself, what are some of the things that happened today or this week that can give me some clues to what I enjoy, what types of people I love meeting, what conversations that make me feel like, God, I could have kept going for hours upon end. What are the things that frustrate me about life and the world that I want to change and be a part of changing potentially? And even looking back at my own life story, what are some things that are giving me clues? What's already happened in my life that gives me clues about who I am, what I believe in, what I'm really about, right? Sometimes a lot of my clients will say, it's when I was in my, sort of mid-20s to early 30s, where before I started getting, really stuck on things like mortgages and, all the responsible things that kind of helped me down to make up my decisions. I was more free then, and when I
Yeah.
was more free then, my brain sort of went into more fantasies and beautiful stories about what could be possible. And then
Yeah.
at some point that stopped for me. Whenever that is, that's different for everyone, right? But go back to that time where when you had the kind of mindset that everything could be possible, what were you thinking about? What did you feel? And sometimes going back to that old self, 28-year-old Lydia, 26-year-old Lydia, when she was more fancy free and footloose, what were some of the things that really mattered to her? And are those things important still today? Right. So taking create spaciousness from the to-dos, the routine. Don't walk the same way to work, right? Do something. Go to a different park, go to a different restaurant, try at a different cafe. That can, I think, really help you to get into a different mindset of possibility.
Yeah, I call those unrealized dreams.
I love it.
When we were back in that dreamy stage, right? Yeah, yeah. All good stuff, Lydia. All good stuff. I know that those who watch and listen are going to start thinking differently about what they're doing and whether it is fulfilling for them the way it is, and what changes need to be made. It doesn't mean that you have to leave what you're doing
Mm,
to find soul fulfilling work, but you might have to change it,
that's right.
and figuring out how that could happen for you is the process that has to happen. So
Mm.
I'm so glad that you got up early to be with us today. I really appreciate that. And I would love for you to share the one best way for people to get in touch with you.
Well, my home is my website at screwthecubicle.com, which you've so lovingly put onto the screen.
Yeah.
And a lot of my free resources there, I think my clients always say the YouTube channel is the first place to start, because you get to binge a lot of some of the career change and meaningful business, advice and tips that I love videos. So I think I explain things a lot clearer as well through video. So my YouTube channel is a great place to start, which is, by the way, you can get it right on the bottom of the homepage of Screw the Cubicle. And go ahead and look at the playlists. I have career transition playlists, I have meaningful business playlists, mindset, lifestyle design. Pick your playlist, pick your show that you want to watch that resonates with you today, and start watching some of those free resources, which I think could be really helpful in supporting you. What's that next step? Not what the 1,000 step is, but what is that
Right.
next step to
Right.
help you do the next thing more clearly, more confidently, so that it's a building block for
Yeah.
more positive steps to come, right?
That's
Another
fabulous.
resource that might be really helpful if people are if they're listening to this and going, what is my ideal work? What if I was to start a business, what kind of service-based business would I be right for? They can start by taking my free quiz, which is screwthecubicle.com/quiz. And they answer a series of 9 very simple questions, but it's quite accurate in defining, helping you understand what pathway, what sort of focus in an online business world, service-based specifically, that your personality type and your genius zone is best suited for, but also being flexible for you to add those ingredients, right? As we talked about, right? Those ingredients into that body of work that makes this pathway your own.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And all of those links will be in the show notes for everyone to see. Lydia, thank you again. I really appreciate your being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I so enjoyed this.
It is my pleasure. And for those of you who are watching and listening, I want to thank you for joining us and for being a part of our community. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, click a star, tell us what you thought. We love to hear from you. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for women. Plus, as a career and life coach, I work with women to help them navigate challenging times more quickly and gracefully. So if something in this episode resonates with you and you'd like a fresh perspective, reach out. Let's talk. The links to connect with Lydia, as I said, are in the show notes below. And I invite you to continue this conversation in my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. And the link for that's below as well. So let's meet again here next week, same time, same place, because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.